America's Top 10 Serial Killers by Infamy. America has a dark history of infamous serial killers whose crimes have shocked the nation and captured the public's morbid fascination. From brutal slayings to meticulously planned murders, these individuals have left an indelible mark on the country's psyche. This list delves into the lives and crimes of the top 10 serial killers by infamy, exploring their backgrounds, horrific deeds, and ultimate fates. While each killer's methods and motivations differ, they all share a legacy of terror that continues to haunt us today. At 10, Aileen Wuornos, often referred to as America's first female serial killer, was born in 1956 in Michigan. She had a troubled childhood, marked by abuse and neglect, and turned to sex work at a young age to survive. Her difficult life, including stints in foster care and homelessness, fueled her anger toward men and society. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos murdered 7 men in Florida, claiming self-defense. She stated the men either assaulted or attempted to assault her during her work as a prostitute. Her method involved shooting her victims at point-blank range and stealing their belongings. Wuornos' story gained notoriety because of her gender and the rare nature of female serial killers. Wuornos was arrested in 1991 after police used evidence from pawnshops and testimony from her lover, Tyria Moore, who cooperated with authorities. Wuornos was convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to death. She was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002, aged 46. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker. Born in 1960 in Texas, Richard Ramirez grew up in a troubled household and developed a fascination with Satanism and violence. His older cousin, a Vietnam War veteran, introduced him to graphic images of war atrocities and violence against women, which heavily influenced Ramirez's worldview. During 1984 to 1985, Ramirez terrorized Los Angeles and San Francisco. He committed home invasions, sexual assaults, and brutal murders, often leaving satanic symbols at the crime scenes. His known body count is at least 14 victims, though he was suspected in more unsolved cases. Ramirez was captured in 1985 after residents in an East Los Angeles neighborhood recognized him and subdued him until police arrived. He was convicted of 13 murders and sentenced to death in 1989. Ramirez died of cancer while on death row in 2013. Albert Fish, born in 1870, was a deeply disturbed individual with a history of mental illness and sadistic tendencies. Growing up in an orphanage, he developed an interest in self-harm and masochism. Later in life, he claimed to hear voices telling him to commit his heinous acts. Fish targeted children, luring them with promises of candy or work. He confessed to killing at least 3 victims, though he claimed to have murdered more than 100. Fish's crimes included cannibalism, which he described in horrifying detail in letters to his victims' families. Fish was arrested in 1934 after police traced a letter he sent to the family of one of his victims. He was convicted of murder and executed by electric chair, January 16, 1936. Aged 65. Dennis Rader, born in 1945 in Kansas, lived a seemingly normal life as a church leader, family man, and Boy Scout volunteer. However, he harbored dark fantasies of control and violence, which he began acting on in the 1970s. The self-named BTK Killer, bind, torture, kill, murdered 10 people between 1974 and 1991 in Wichita, Kansas. Rader's meticulous planning and taunting letters to the media and police earned him infamy. Rader's downfall came in 2005 when he sent a floppy disk to the police which was traced back to him. He was arrested, confessed to the murders, and sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without parole. David Berkowitz, son of Sam. Born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, David Berkowitz grew up feeling abandoned after learning he was adopted. His mental instability worsened as he grew older, culminating in delusions and a belief that a demonic dog was commanding him to kill. Berkowitz's killing spree spanned from 1976 to 1977, during which he murdered 6 people and wounded 7 others in New York City. He targeted young couples, often shooting them in parked cars with a .44 caliber revolver. Berkowitz was arrested in 1977 after a parking ticket linked him to one of the crime scenes. He confessed to the killings and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. He remains in prison and claims to have found religion. John Wayne Gacy, born in 1942 in Illinois, was known as the Killer Clown due to his work as a party clown. Gacy was well liked in his community, but hid a sinister side. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy sexually assaulted and murdered 33 young men and boys, burying most of their bodies in the crawl space of his home. His victims were lured under the guise of job offers or parties. Gacy was arrested in 1978 after police investigated the disappearance of a teenage boy last seen with him. Authorities discovered the bodies in his home. Gacy was convicted and sentenced to death. He was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, aged 52. Born in 1946 in Vermont, Ted Bundy was a charming and intelligent individual who led a double life. While studying law, he began committing heinous crimes that shocked the nation. Bundy confessed to killing 30 women across multiple states in the 1970s, though the actual number is believed to be higher. He lured victims by feigning injury or impersonating authority figures, then assaulted and murdered them. Bundy was captured in 1978 after a traffic stop in Florida and was later linked to multiple murders. He was convicted and sentenced to death, eventually executed in the electric chair January 24, 1989, aged 42. Born in 1960 in Wisconsin, Jeffrey Dahmer exhibited disturbing behaviors from a young age, including a fascination with dead animals. His social isolation and troubled family life fueled his descent into depravity. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 young men, engaging in necrophilia and cannibalism. He kept body parts as trophies, which horrified the nation when discovered. Dahmer was arrested in 1991 after one of his intended victims escaped and led police to his apartment. He was sentenced to multiple life terms and killed by a fellow inmate, 28 November 1994, aged 34. Ed Gein, born in 1906 in Wisconsin, grew up in an isolated household under the domination of his religiously fanatic mother. Her teachings on sin and women distorted his perception of reality. Gein's crimes inspired iconic horror characters. He murdered at least 2 women in the 1950s and exhumed corpses from graves to create macabre trophies and furniture. His gruesome acts of body mutilation shocked investigators. Gein was arrested in 1957 after a missing woman's remains were found on his property. Declared insane, he was confined to a mental institution until his death in 1984. Often called America's first serial killer, H. Holmes was born in 1861 in New Hampshire. He was a con artist and manipulator who used his charm and intelligence to prey on others. Holmes constructed a murder castle in Chicago during the 1893 World's Fair. The building contained trapdoors, gas chambers, and secret rooms to torture and kill his victims. He confessed to 27 murders but may have killed up to 200 people. Holmes was arrested in 1894 for insurance fraud, which led investigators to uncover his murders. He was convicted of 1 murder and hanged May 16, 1896, age 34. These killers serve as grim reminders of the depths of human depravity, each leaving a trail of tragedy and horror that continues to haunt America. Thank you for watching. If you would like to support the channel, please like and subscribe.